All right, well, the immigration crisis, of course, is probably already out of control. And by the end of this year, experts predict some 90,000 unaccompanied children could be apprehended at the border. That's more than triple of the number just a few years ago. Here to discuss the growing number of illegals crossing the border is a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, representing the great state of Arizona, Congressman Paul Gosar. It's great to have you with us, Congressman.
Thanks for having me on, John.
All right, so there's a lot of media outlets out there right now reporting that Ted Cruz is going to try and push some of his own legislation on this issue. And quoting a Cruz spokesperson here, Catherine Frazier in Breitbart News, quote, "No legislation should be considered unless it specifically prohibits Obama from expanding the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA Act, which allows those who have come here illegally to stay. That should be a prerequisite for any bill considered to address this crisis." Do you agree with that?
I think it's a very good start because what ends up happening is that's what started this process in the beginning. The president failed to uphold the rule of law, and people took advantage of that. Knowing that if they just got their kids here to this country, that they would be given a refuge.
What do you think that type of provision, if it is included in a Senate bill, which probably wouldn't get a vote in the Senate in the first place, but if that type of provision was included in a House bill, would that bring us closer to a resolution of the crisis?
Well, I think that's what some of what the House would be considering. Number one is that the amount that the president's asking for is, in my terms, dead on arrival. I mean, there's almost $700 million that is placed in here about wildfire. What does that have to do with immigration? Mm-hmm. And there really is not an outlining plan that the president has presented in which to address this issue. He's just wanting to throw money at this problem, and it seems like that's the problem that this president has over and over again. Throwing money and condoning bad behavior is not the answer that we're looking for. And what we want to do is curb this response.
And that's I think the majority opinion of a lot of Americans. But what's your take on the corn and Cuellar bill?
Once again, I think that the opportunity is it's another piece that we could utilize to make sure that we speed up this application. But the other part is that we've got to treat Central America no differently than Mexico or Canada, contiguous states, and that this has to be a very narrowed application in regards to sex trafficking, not just a general application to just anybody from anywhere.
Yeah, and you're referring to the Wilberforce Act, and that's another point of contention in this whole debate. And it seems like the pressure from Democrats building on the president not to change that and not to go along with any plans to change the Wilberforce Act, which you just referenced, is increasing.
It is, and as well as enforcing the rule of law. For God's sakes, immigration is a congressional issue for House and Senate, not the executive branch. And once again, we have to make sure that anything that we put into a bill is not misconstrued, but also will have the enforcement of the presidency through the Attorney General. We've seen an absolute lack of that, and actually a despisement by this Attorney General for the rule of law and the Constitution.
Now, we can all agree, I think most of us anyway who live outside of Washington, that $3.7 billion is a lot of money specifically to deal with this problem here. But I think we can also agree, Congressman, that the longer we wait to come up with a real meaningful solution here, the more expensive it's going to be.
Oh, absolutely. But that shows you the void of leadership that we have from this president in regards to this issue. He won't even go down to review the border. He almost had to be disenfranchised in regards to coming to Texas. But it shows you an absolute a lack that the president has for addressing an issue that he frankly created. In America, as growing unrest with him is showing that in the polls.
And real quickly, I want to get your take also on putting the National Guard on the border. This is a solution here that's been talked about a lot as well.
I think it is the perfect solution. At least another piece to that puzzle, in which the governors of the border states can activate to show that force. But to really stem the tide is that we have to make sure that people know that we're upholding the rule of law, and that what they're interpreting as being amnesty or having a provision to stay is not going to be the case, that they'll be going home.
And the folks that say that would only create a larger problem, because you'd be sending folks from Guatemala, Honduras, et cetera, back into Mexico, where, again, they're not legal to be there either.
Well, the thing about it is also we also have to be dealing with Mexico and these other countries. We are a sovereign country. We have sovereign laws, and we expect them to follow the same application that we have to follow for them. This is one of those get tough policies with our neighbors. If they want to have some foreign aid or they want to trade with us, there's got to be some provisions in which they're upholding the rule of law as well. This is not an acceptable behavior, and it would be wonderful for the president to get a spine in regards to this issue, because it might be just one of those aspects that he gets a win in foreign policy.
And we'll see what happens there. The president is expected to speak today, again urging Congress to act on this issue. And I know you're taking a close look at that, Congressman. And we'll leave that issue aside for 1 second, because I also want to talk to you based on your seat on the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. New reports now, the FBI taking a closer look, the DOJ also, at what happened to those missing Lois Lerner emails. Is there anything new here that makes you feel any more confident that we're going to get to the bottom of this?
Absolutely not, because what you still have is the Attorney General, the head of the Department of Justice, and they all answer to the Attorney General, who's shown no stomach to have an independent investigator. For God's sakes, there was bad years of 2009, 2010, and 2011 for hard drives within this administration. We see violations over and over again of the Hatch Act. These are things that what we need to do is have an independent investigator that doesn't hold any cards to the Attorney General of this administration, and have the independence of following the leads wherever they may go. It's going to be sad that we're not going to hear from Miss Lerner until she's in a criminal trial trying to save her neck from prison.
Anything less than jail time for Miss Lerner here is going to be unsatisfying to you. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Here's a lady that her time in FEC was, a failed policy at best, targeting people. The courts bailed her out, and then once again, the audacity to actually put her in a position within the IRS, that's conceived and contrived in regards to trying to stifle, 501c4s and political and conservative and religious aspects is despicable. This is a person who doesn't have good behavior and should not be rewarded at all.
Now, again, as we look ahead to the DOJ's investigation into what happened here, do you expect to see any less, pushback? Because, again, many aides, White House aides, have been asked to testify, and it seems like there's some stonewalling going on that front as well.
Well, once again, it comes back down to the interpretation of the rule of law. The president has said that he gives absolute immunity, and from that standpoint, that's a flawed aspect. The Democratic Party and the president doesn't have to look any further than 2008, where the court actually said that, a president can't exert executive privilege over those individuals within the administration or within the White House in regards to that aspect. So, once again, we're having to challenge the court to rectify and remedy, bringing the emperor to the dinner table so that he responds appropriately.
Well, Congressman, we want to thank you for your time. We are going to take a closer look at the Hatch Act. You mentioned that before. There's some new allegations here about someone working for the government, receiving a taxpayer-funded salary, but at the same time working to get the president reelected here. So we'll take a closer look at the Hatch Act, an older law from the 1930s here, but might be front and center here on the IRS issue this week as well. Congressman Paul Gosar, member of the House Oversight Committee, also on the front lines there, so to speak, in the immigration battle, representing the state of Arizona. Great to talk to you, sir.
Thank you, John.
Covered a lot of ground in that interview.
Well, we try to cover a lot of ground. It's a very important issue. In fact, new polling information out today shows that this is the #1 issue right now Americans are really tuning into. I believe Gallup has that polling information out. But interesting to note, the congressman there saying that they need to work on some sort of plan which would require cooperation from Mexico, from Guatemala, from Honduras. You can't, as many people would say, just turn these people back at the U.S.-Mexico border because they're not from Mexico, and then they're in limbo again, and then you run the risk of putting them in even further peril.
But the reality is these people are escaping Mexico, they're escaping Central America for good reasons, a lot of them, because of drug trafficking, because there's so crime-ridden. Do you really think that these countries are going to come together and say, yeah, we want to work with you on this, when they're trying to flee those countries?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think part of this, they don't have the same resources that we have to deal with the problem. But when you can't have Democrats and Republicans getting together, even though we have the Corn and Cuellar bill, you don't have a lot of cooperation, and it seems as if the both sides are moving further and further apart. So if you can't get representatives of the United States Congress to work together, I don't see how you can get cooperation from foreign nations.
Exactly. And again, I mean, you know, Mexico's been holding on to one of our Marines for over 100 days now, and they have people fleeing their country left and right. They're, you know, crime-ridden.
Excellent
drug
points.
Cartel running them, you know.
And as the congressman conceded in that interview, the longer that Congress and the president wait to deal with this problem together in a constructive and substantive way, the more it's going to cost all of us taxpayers here at home. Of course, these are the issues we're talking about here today on America's Forum. Much more to talk about on the show. We'll be back with more right after this commercial break.